All right, hi everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this week's Snack and Chat, Adopt for Life's weekly Facebook Live, where we explore the topics that are top of mind for families formed by adoption, kinship, and customary care. My name is Chantal, the Community Engagement Liaison with Adopt for Life, and I'll be here to monitor the chat, posting links and some key takeaways from today's discussion. And our host is here, of course, Julia Ross, also from Adopt for Life. And our guest today is SP Joseph Lyons. And thank you so much for being with us today. First, I'm going to introduce our guest. SP Joseph Lyons is an Anishinaabe Algonquin children's author, fantasy, sci-fi, romance novelist, speaker, and Indigenous education advocate. He is the author of the Drux series, the New Tao Tales trilogy. You'll have to jump in and make sure I'm pronouncing these things properly. And the Foster Care series. He is also the co-author of Roses Thorns and has been featured in collaborative and charity publications. He's also a sought-after speaker in the education and foster care sectors. He shares his journey as a foster care 60s scoop adoptee, intergenerational survivor of the residential school system, and the long, hard journey to find his roots. He has spoken to at high schools, colleges, children's aid societies, and on CES Pride panels. And he's able to share the struggles that exist for many Indigenous peoples while trying to navigate life with deep wounds of intergenerational trauma and the triumphs and successes he's had despite the hardships he's endured. So thanks again for joining us. Whether you're watching us live, maybe you're watching this later on replay, thank you for taking the time to be with us. Feel free to ask your questions and put your comments in the chat. We will be sure to get back to you and possibly ask your question live. We do want to remind you that this live stream is on our public Facebook page. So any information that you're putting in the comments, you just want to be mindful that you're not putting identifying information, names, health information, things like that, that you just probably don't want to share publicly, especially if you're asking questions about minor. So with that in mind, we want to hear from you. We always love hearing from you. So please enjoy today's discussion. I'm just going to hand things over because I feel like I've been blathering on forever. I'm going to hand things over to Julia.
Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here today with you. I guess we'll just get started with our first question because I hope to get through them all. We're very excited to hear from you and hear your feedback on this story. Can you tell us, what was the inspiration behind Little Bear in foster care? Was it personal, professional, or maybe both?
Actually, it was both. So I was approached by a Mohawk elder who told me she'd been waiting for me for 20 years. An Indigenous author who had been through the foster care system. She asked me to write a book for Indigenous children that are currently still in care. And when an elder asks you to do something, you do it. So I sat down and I took my journey and my time in care and I put it into a book for Indigenous kids in care. And the whole idea was nothing existed when I was in care as far as supports or resources. And so I wrote it as if I was writing it to my 3-4-year-old self. What would I tell myself? What would I explain to myself now if I had the chance? So I put it all together in a book, and for me, it's a message of hope. It's information, it's letting them know they're not alone, letting them know there's an ODR process available to them. But yeah, mainly this is a book of hope, something that I didn't have that I wish I did. So that was my motivation, personal and professional.
Right. Can you tell us a little bit more about the character Little Bear?
Yeah, Little Bear. So I use the anthropomorphic animal imagery. I find that even when I was a kid, I could relate to the journey of an animal, and if that journey was similar to my own. So bears are very sacred to our culture. So I used a bear, and the bear himself, he is taken into care. He's confused, he's scared, he doesn't know what's going on. Some of the homes he's in are nice, some of them aren't so nice. Some of the kids play with him, some of them don't. He has a lot of big feelings. He expresses his feelings. When he's angry, he roars. When he's scared, he wants to run away. He doesn't know what's going on. He misses his family. So throughout the process, he's then brought into an ODR original dispute resolution circle, the traditional circle process for Indigenous people, something that we've been doing for thousands of years, with his family and his community as an opportunity to talk about what's going on, to plan for him, and to hear from him. How are you feeling? Why are you feeling this way? And he's able to share that he loves his family very much. He's happy that they're there in the circle with him. And by the end of the book, even though he's still in foster care, knowing that his family and his community are walking with him and planning with him, he no longer feels scared and alone. And that's sort of the gist of the message that I want to be able to give, that there are supports now, there is a planning process, and that you can have your family and your community and those that care about you with you in that planning process. You have a voice, something I didn't have when I was in care. You're heard and your words are respected. And I think that's crucially important. So I put it to the kids, I'm like, there is an ODR process available to you, advocate for it. It helps speed up the planning process as well, because workers know how long this process can take sometimes with courts and with appeals and whatnot. So it's a way to say, hey, let's get to the root of what's going on. Let's make a plan and let's really walk beside this child or these children.
Mm-hmm. And as you say, let them use their voice in participating in that planning of care, right?
Absolutely.
That's huge, yeah. Who would benefit from owning or reading this book the most, do you feel?
Initially it would be any Indigenous child who's currently in the foster system. But not only that, when I give speaking events, I'll say, this book is going into libraries and schools, and any child should really read this book to get a better understanding of what it's like to be an Indigenous child in foster care. So, you're a child at school, you have an Indigenous friend at school, all you know is that he's Indigenous and he's in foster care. If you read this book, you get a better understanding of, what your friend might be going through, some of the feelings that he might have. And it helps give children who aren't in a situation a better understanding of what it's like to be an Indigenous child in foster care. And I think it helps build those allyships even earlier on, where it stops being, this is my friend Tommy who's Indigenous and in care. It just becomes, this is my friend Tommy. And those secondary pieces beyond the humanity become somewhat irrelevant, beyond understanding, hey, I didn't know what you're currently going through. How can I be a better friend? How can I? Sometimes they might just need a hug, and being able to educate everyone who's around that child, as well as kin providers, foster homes, and social workers, to be able to say, this is what it's like for an Indigenous child in care. Here are the real fears, confusions, worries. Here are some of the things that you also as caregivers and as decision makers can advocate for these children to help make this process as easy as possible, rather than as difficult as it was when I went through care.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What is the significance for you of having those with lived experience of the child welfare system and foster care system share their perspectives? Why is it so important to hear from people like yourself?
I think that having lived it, I know firsthand what it's like to go through foster care. I know some of the terrible things that can happen in foster care. I know the pitfalls that I fell through or that others fell through, right from the care to the ability to communicate my worries and fears, right through to the way that files were kept. I did manage to get my own in-care file, and when I read through it, the level of inconsistencies, the very little effort that went into mapping my history, my heritage. I was listed on one page as Jewish, on another page as Caucasian, and on another page as Mexican. There was no consistency, and those things weren't who I was at all. So being able to say to those, not only those in care, that, hey, I know what you're going through, but to those that make decisions for kids in care, like workers. When I speak, I say, here's what I went through. Here's what my file looked like. Here's the decisions that were made for me. Here's how I wasn't heard. And I use those as tools to say, be mindful when you're out there, when you're taking notes, to really try and capture the heritage, to really have consistency, to make sure these children have a voice. I know a lot has changed since my time in care, but there's still room for change. And to be able to say, from the process of we need to get involved in a family, right through to the child might end up in care, to how do we care for them, how do we get them the supports they need, and how do we get them into a home without adding to the level of trauma that they've already endured. Because I can say that my time in care was the most traumatic thing I've ever experienced. Perhaps I was rescued from a very unhealthy environment, but I think what I had to go through to end up in my adoptive home was far worse of a process. So, you know, to be able to say, I have a perspective, I can share the real lived pains. There's things in life that I can have sympathy for or have empathy for, but I haven't personally experienced them. I would have to leave that into the hands of those that do. I can be an ally of a lot of things that I haven't experienced, but I am only an ally in the case of, well, I am Indigenous. So in this case, and I have been through care, I can actually say, hey, this is what it feels like. So an example of that is years ago, I used to work in the optical industry, and I don't wear glasses. So I'm helping somebody with their frames, with their lenses, and he looks at me and he says, do you wear glasses? I said, no, I don't. He goes, then how do you know what it's like for me? I said, you're absolutely right. So what I did is I went and I got some +4 contact lenses, put them in my eyes, and then grabbed a -4 prescription pair of glasses and put them on. And when I was at work, that's what I would wear so that I would understand. I would see what it's like to try and adjust the glasses and the blurriness and sometimes the headaches that you get so that I could really understand the clients that I was working with. Now, not everybody gets an opportunity to do that, but I thought he was absolutely right. Who am I to help him in an area that I know nothing about?
Mm-hmm.
So I think those stories are crucially important.
Yeah, that's such a good example. We often talk about seeing through things through other people's lenses, and you literally did that.
Right.
It's so important. Yeah. This book aims to help children find their voice and navigate the complex emotions they may experience when placed in an unfamiliar environment. Will you share with us why you felt this was an important message to get out?
I think that I'm married to a social worker. I have a lot of social worker friends, and I've heard the conversations where many have great hearts and they really want to make change. But even sitting down, I said, but do you know what it's actually like to be this child and the impact that your decisions have? And anything from, you know, workers are too busy to really touch base a lot with the child, or worker changes happen and the inconsistencies in the child's life at that point. It's too important to say, you know, we're dealing with lives and we're dealing with families, and the impacts that has are forever. So it's crucial to really take the time to sit down, map out a real plan, talk with families. I know that there's this. So having been a kin provider, social workers come in, they want to tick all these boxes. They want to make sure you're going to do this, that, and the other. They want to put you through safe and pride. There's this whole, you know, dance you have to do to prove that you're stable enough to care for your own kin. As an Indigenous person, I, you know, followed some of it, and I objected to a lot of it, saying it's not appropriate for Indigenous people. It's not appropriate for people who've been through care. It's also, it seems very condescending to those that know the system, that live with a social worker. It's not a cut and dry solution for everyone. It would have made more sense if, you know, people came in and said, you know, this is amazing that you're here to do this. Let's just have a conversation. Let's talk about the important issues. We'd love to know how you're going to support your family culturally. We'd love to know how, you know, what do you use for discipline? What is the sleeping arrangements? Things that matter. But some of the questions that are in the safe and pride just seem really unnecessary and invasive. It almost seems like there needs to be a whole cultural shift. And especially when you're dealing with families that may have a history with the agency or may have intergenerational trauma. So I can say, sitting at a table, workers come in to talk to me about being a kin placement. I immediately have this visceral reaction to CAS in my house. I have no reason to be worried. But the issue is that I have this reaction. It can be perceived that I'm not cooperating, I'm hiding something, and then there's more probing that happens, which then pushes me further back, and then a downward spiral builds. So one of the things I say is, when you're walking into an Indigenous home or another home that may have dealt with the system historically, there's a whole other approach that has to happen. And it has to be made aware that you're walking into a home where they already see you as a threat. Right. So how do you alleviate that threat? How do you actually have a conversation? How do you step in and say, I'm actually here to help? And in what way can I help? Rather than saying you need to check all these boxes, you need to jump through all these hoops, or the most traumatic thing, we're going to remove your children from you, which is the most traumatic thing you can do to anybody ever, to the children and to the parents. And I know there are some situations where the dangers are just so high, where there really isn't an alternative. but I know that the whole system could shift with a whole different culture and a view on things, where when working with families, the families are actually saying, hey, thank you, you actually really helped me, rather than I went to CAS for help and I lost my children.
Yes, yes, exactly. There's so much of this that is, a family is associated with a file, but these are people and, real emotions, as you say. You can't really take a one size fits all approach to it. It has to be a case by case, and really getting to know the individual family's history and their needs going forward.
Exactly.
That's really important. In your book, Little Bear experiences the circle process. Can you share with us more about the circle process and why it is so important?
Absolutely. So the circle process, whenever there's an issue or something that needs to be resolved, everyone who's related to that process, even elders or someone who runs the circle, comes into the circle. In the circle, everybody is equal, everybody's voice is heard, and everybody's words are respected. We usually have a talking feather or a talking stick that's passed around the circle. Whoever holds that item is the one that's able to speak. Everyone else must listen until it's their turn and they're past the talking item. It's designed to ensure you listen far more than you speak, and everyone who speaks gets the opportunity to be fully heard. I can say, I'm guilty of this, maybe some other people can relate, where somebody is telling you something and you hijack the middle of their conversation to answer, but had you not done that and listened to the rest of what they were going to say, they would have actually answered it for you. So it's forcing everyone to be heard before you have a chance to speak. So if I'm in a circle with 5 other people, I will hear everything all 5 people have to say from beginning to end before I respond or comment. And sometimes it's done in one circle. Sometimes you need a few circles to really work through things. I've had people who are not part of an Indigenous community that thought this is nonsense. What is this? We don't understand. Who come into the circle process and at the end of it think this is amazing. This was a great way to really flesh out all that was going on. I felt really heard. It really helps speed up the planning process. Also, people who are part of that circle have an input into what's happening, and people who have an input into the planning are far more likely to follow those plans. We know that there are people who make plans, don't necessarily follow the plans, and often they feel like the plan was made for me. I didn't even really agree to it so much as, I sat in a circle. I really got to put my say in what I can do, what I can't, what my fears, worries are. They were addressed. I'm part of this plan. I'm excited. And I've said in a lot of my speaks that this, although ODR is, what we've used in our tribes for thousands of years, it works in every scenario. It doesn't have to be an Indigenous family. It could work at a workplace, during a meeting, during any kind of conflict. I've sat in some board meetings where this would have been beneficial, where people are talking over people, where to say, hold on, let's just step back. Let's give everyone a fair and equal opportunity to share, and then we respond. And what a difference it makes.
Yeah, absolutely. Validating everybody's points of view. And as you say, when you're a part of the plan, you're much more likely to participate in the plan. That's
exactly
true. 2 weeks ago was Canada's first National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. We read that you took part in an event in Stratford, Ontario, where you read from and discussed your book, Little Bear in Foster Care. If you are comfortable, will you share with us a little bit about your experience that day and why it was so important for the book's message to be heard on that day too?
Yeah, I actually had 4 different speaking events on that day. It was a very full day. I unfortunately had to turn down more events than I could end up attending. I started the day doing a Zoom speak for a CAS, sharing my story, sharing the importance of the book. Then I did an in-person speaking event at another CAS location. Then I went to St. Mary's. They were having a big event in their park, so I was one of the speakers for that event. Got a chance to share with that local community who I am, what's happening, the whole idea that we're all part of the medicine wheel, everybody, no matter who you are, no matter what your background is, and we all have the opportunity to work together. And I've never been for the us versus them. I've always been about the we. So I say, I have an Indigenous voice. I'm trying to speak for the rights of Indigenous people, but I'm also an ally to Black Lives Matter, to the LGBTQ community, and so on. So when I speak as an Indigenous person and non-Indigenous people come around and speak as well, that amplifies my voice, and we're grateful for our allies. When members of another community who are asking for rights, my voice helps amplify their voice. You know, when people ask me, well, how do you make change? I'm like, well, you talk to your politicians, your local governments, advocate for the change. Let's not do it as a us versus them. Let's do it as a we. So if there's a bunch of different voices together speaking, advocating, you're more likely to be heard. So that was my message at St. Mary's and at Stratford. I told my story again. I incorporate the book because it leads into, you know, these are our children. So for us, our children are the future of our communities. Without our children, our communities die. So to be able to say the amount of children that are currently in care, they need our support. They need our advocacy. They need to be, if they're in this process, taken through this process as amicably as possible and brought out on the other side where they're fully supported by the people who care about them, by their communities, so that they can continue to grow up to become the language keepers and the elders and the knowledge keepers in our communities. And this book is one of many tools to say, you know, this is a short period that you're going through right now, but you can go on to do amazing things, and your community can help you do that. So I read the book to people to let them know what's in it, what it says, why it's important, and encourage them to get copies for themselves or for anyone they feel that might need it as a resource. I position it as, this is a resource to help. If you want to use it, great. If you don't, well, then maybe one day you will. Far less so than buy my book. It's not about buy my book. It's about use a resource to help the kids that need it the most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and have it on your radar for maybe not today, but you know it exists for, you know, maybe there's a family that you are helping or supporting at some point that really could benefit from it.
Absolutely.
I feel like this book should be in every elementary school.
Yes.
Every school library.
Yes.
This book should be.
Yeah.
Just put it out there for all those teachers watching.
Yes, that's right.
We're trying to get those relationships established, and I'll speak to schools and I'll let them know this is something that should absolutely be in your library. I gave one of the books away at the Stratford speaking event. The gentleman I gave it to his 8-year-old daughter, and she did a book report project on it for her class. And I was like, yes, there you go. Yeah. That's the information. That's the allyship in action. And that's the information being taught to this class who may go on to do great things with it.
Yes, exactly. That dominoes effect of empowerment. And yeah, for sure. Okay. What advice would you give to adoptive kin and customary care families who are raising an Indigenous child or children?
I would say that it is crucially important to recognize, to find out first, and then recognize and honor the heritage of this child, and to learn what that means. You know, so to say, well, the child is Indigenous. Well, it goes beyond that. What does that mean? What tribe are they from? What band are they from? Where is the reserve their people come from? Do you know the history of their people? Do you know the ceremonies that are important, the practices that they practice? Are you able to support that child in their own communities? So, you know, is there a place you can go to keep them a part of their community and the events that they partake in, so that this child grows up knowing who they are taught to be proud of who they are, and they are part of a community that's going to teach them all the pieces that they need. So if you're a non-Indigenous foster home, kin home, adoptive home, it isn't your responsibility to do the teaching yourself, but it is your responsibility to ensure that that teaching is kept as a forefront priority to the identity of that child, that as that child grows up, they are as healthy and strong as an Indigenous person can be with their community walking around them. That is probably the strongest message ever. I know that there are Indigenous kids that have been adopted. They've been raised by the adopted family in their practices and traditions. And then, as it's been for hundreds of years, then the culture slowly dies through them. And then they end up in a situation like me, where I've had to search all that out as an adult. And I've had to begin all that learning as an adult. And I'm very passionate about my heritage. I'm very proud of who I am, and I've been doing a lot of learning. But but to ensure that these children get that early on so that they don't have to try and figure it out as an adult is very, very crucial, very important.
Yeah, I think that's so important what you said about not necessarily feeling like the caregiver needs to be the teacher. It would really be the role of the caregiver to be nurturing those connections to the people that the child needs to be in contact with, and nurture those connections for that heritage.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What's next in Little Bear's journey? Any plans for a follow-up or series, or what's next?
Yes, actually, Little Bear. I'll just hold it up for those who haven't seen it. This is the book here. Little Bear is 1 in 4 in a series.
Okay.
In an ongoing series. So Little Bear tackles sort of what it's like to be a kid in care, what the ODR process is. The book itself is actually published through goodminds.com. So anyone out there who isn't familiar with Good Minds, please go to their website. Anything and everything you could ever need for Indigenous resources, they've got it. And they're an amazing place to deal with. They care very deeply about the Indigenous community and the education of all those around that are looking to be connected with. How do I teach my kids in class this? How do I support this? Or, you want to read some great graphic novels. They've got them. You want to read adult stories. You want to read residential school stories, little kid books talking about our traditions, the treaties, you name it, they've got it. So I would encourage everyone to check that out. Little Bear was written by me, published by Good Minds, illustrated by Julian Graffineur, who's one of their illustrators, and I also had the book translated into Anishinaabe by language keeper James Maleshwana of Wikwemekong unceded territory. The book tells its story. At the end of the book, there are 3 traditional teachings. So it talks about smudging. What is it? How do you do it? It talks about the talking feather. It also talks about the circle process. Unfortunately, some of these kids, this may be the only teachings they ever get. So if one can plant those seeds in them early on, and they do have to wait until adulthood, maybe those seeds manifest in a way where they do care about their culture. There's also a note from me at the end of the book that explains that I understand what you're going through. I've been there. I know the feelings and fears you have. This is a short period. You'll have the rest of your life to go on to do amazing things. If you're ever feeling scared and alone, read this book. It's for you. So Little Bear is one avenue of how foster care works. There's another book, Wolf Pups Miss Their Pack, that follow a sibling couple through some kin placements, through some foster placements, and ultimately into adoption. Unfortunately, these siblings don't get adopted together. We know that happens. Sometimes siblings do get separated, but through their journey, they are able to collect the various medicines for their bundle, and then they meet up at a powwow at the end, and all the people who had walked with them in their journey are at the powwow to continue to support them. There is Bisons Journey.
Me too. That's what I was going to say. I didn't want to interrupt. That's beautiful. Yeah.
There's Bison's Journey Home, where it talks about young Bison and how his mother has a very, very difficult time taking care of him. And eventually they're moved from the good grasses into the city, which is a stinky city. It's not really for them. His mother kind of disappears out of the picture. He's raised by the cows, who take really, really good care of him. And then as he grows up, he hasn't seen another bison for years. The bison community comes back, thanks the cows for raising him, and then brings him back into the bison community where he can grow and thrive. So it talks about how sometimes we're not raised in the communities in foster care where we have the culture, but the culture is still available to us at any point. And then there's eaglets lose their nest. It talks about 3 eaglets that are born in the nest. There's a terrible storm that knocks the nest down. 2 of the eaglets end up clinging to the mountain and aren't able to grow and thrive. But the one eaglet is able to grow and soar high above, close to Creator. It's that whole 1 in 3 are resilient. And as that eaglet grows into a full eagle, he's able to then come back down and to assist his siblings who had gotten stuck and gotten trapped. And it tells that story from the fact that just because you're in care doesn't mean that you are so broken you can't do things, that you couldn't reach out to family. I've been a kin provider for some of my siblings' kids. I've tried to work with my siblings to help pull them out of some of the situations that they had been in. And it sort of speaks on the resilience piece and what you can do with your resilience. So those are the 4 that are going to be coming out that are all part of that initial series. But then the series is ongoing. So it'll talk about Little Bear's journey as he continues to grow up, and the wolf pups and the eaglets and the bison, to the point where Little Bear might become a kin provider or a foster home or a rock star. You know, the idea to say that just because you're in care doesn't mean that you won't be able to go on to do amazing things. So it's going to be a regular, ongoing series. I would love the idea that something like Little Bear is in the hands of a child in care. As the series continues to progress, they're continuing to read the books. They go into adulthood. They're like, well, look at Little Bear has been able to achieve. Look at what the wolf pups have gone on to do. I want to do those things. I want to be a social worker. I want to be a care provider in some way. I want to be a speaker. I want to be an author. I want to be a rock star. I want to be whatever I want to be. And because Little Bear can do it, I can do it too. So I want to. And that's kind of the long-term game and strategy and, you know, amping up for these kids to be able to say, yes, you can do anything you want.
Absolutely. And so the other 3 books, do we have dates as to when we can anticipate that?
I'm hoping that Wolf Pup's going to come out by December, and the other ones every 6 months or so. I might get my knuckles wrapped for saying that, but that's just a window for now. We'll see. We'll see how it comes. But
Well, make sure you let us know, and we'll let our community know when those.
Yeah,
get
sure.
released.
yeah, as soon as a new book is out, or even if it's up for pre-order, or if we have some sort of date on it, I'm going to send that out to everyone and let them know, hey, the next book is out. Give it a read, check it out, because someone might look at Little Bear and say, hey, I'm Little Bear, but what happened to my brother?
Yes.
Wolf Pup is coming out, and now you can actually see the journey that they take together and what that looks like.
Exactly. So on that note, where can anybody who's listening today or going to be rewatching, where can they get Little Bear?
So you can go to goodminds.com, go right to the search window and type in Little Bear in foster care. Otherwise, you can go to my website, which is www.spjosephlyons.com, so JOSEPHLYONS. And there's a link right there under the foster care series tab. I've got other works up there if you want to check them out as well. All sorts of information. If you want to send me a message to say hi, you can do it from the website too. It's a full resource to who I am and what I'm all about.
That's
But yes, if
fantastic.
you Good Minds and you search up my book, don't just search up my book, look at everything else that they've got, because they've got a ton of amazing resources there.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'm sure Chantel will get that link available for everybody. So we just have a few more minutes, I guess. Is there any other final messages that you want to make sure we get out there?
Just if you're Indigenous, don't let your voice be stifled. Know that this life is short and it's yours, and make the most of it. And if you're an ally, and it doesn't mean you have to be fully versed on everything. An ally is also someone who is constantly learning and wanting to affect change too. The one thing I love about allies is that they often have avenues and venues to speak that I may not. So you might have a group around you. It could be family, it could be a faith group, it could be places you work, it could be friends in influential places that you have, where you could say, hey, let's have a conversation about this Indigenous stuff. What is it? What is Truth and Reconciliation all about? What's the history behind it? Let's have a conversation. Or a news article comes up. Let's talk about it. What does this mean? What is going on? Let's debunk some of the myths. Let's break down some of the stereotypes. Let's realize that this isn't about pointing fingers of blame so much as walking together. I'm not out there saying this is your fault or historically this happened, so you need to be blamed. It's not about that. It's about how do we grow together now. When Christopher Columbus originally landed, he was welcomed. His people on the ship were dying of scurvy. They were fed. They were nursed back to health. And when they headed home, their ship was filled up with the supplies they'd need to go. That's the kind of people that we were. It's the kind of people we still are. There are a lot of hurts. There's a lot of anger there for sure. Everyone's in a different place in their journey. But keeping that in mind, we want to grow. We want to be heard. We want to be respected, as many other groups out there do. And we need our allies to walk hand in hand with us. So I encourage allies. If anyone has any questions about what it means to be an ally, send me a message. I can help you with that. I can point you in different directions. Let's work together. As the medicine wheel says, we're all one. So let's all be one.
Thank you so much.
So we had a couple questions that asked if there were any plans to have this book translated into French.
Actually, somebody at the publisher asked me that. He said, I was a French teacher. Would you want this book translated into French? I said, absolutely. If people want it, if people wanted it in Cantonese and Russian, whatever they want, if they want it, let's do it. So yes, there have been some talks around that for sure. The publishers are aware that that has come up, so I can put another little bug in an ear there and say there's been some requests for that. So let's see how we can make that happen.
That's great. So there you go. So there is one in the works, hopefully soon.
Hopefully, yes.
Well, I think, first of all, thanks again. I know it's thank you, but thank you for taking the time to be here. Thank you for being so open, sharing your thoughts, your insights, your story. It's just been such an amazing experience. I hope that you will come back when you have other books out and we can continue the discussion, because I think it's going to be very helpful for many families in our communities.
And I thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
So we are doing a giveaway. I mean, for those that are watching, and we will allow people who are still watching this on replay, that SP Joseph has agreed to give away one of his books, Little Bear in Foster Care. So it's super easy. All you have to do, which you probably already are, liking and following Adopt for Life on Facebook. I've already put the link to follow and like SP Joseph's Facebook page. So you head over there, like and follow. And if you're a resident of Ontario, you will be qualified and entered into the draw to receive a free copy of Little Bear in Foster Care. I put the links to the website. I put the links to Good Minds. And actually, and then you said there were graphic novels. My kids love graphic novels. So I'm going to head over there like right now after this and go get some. So thanks everybody for watching. Thank you, Julia, too, for your amazing questions. Please join us next week. Next week, we like to do, once in a while, there's been a lot of new faces around here. Julia, one day you're going to have to be on one of these. Get to know your regional parent liaison. But next week is Nikosi. So please join us and we're going to get to know Nikosi better. Everybody have a great day and take care of yourselves. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Thank you.